Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Quick, what's your spleen do? I know I got a bunch of organs in here that do something. I need most of them, I'm not sure. But the spleen is one that you hear about, but what's it do? Anyways, Scott sent me notes at stevedailywire.com. Check out the story Greg Wilson wrote. Doctors took out wrong organ in botched surgery that took 5 specialists to unravel. And that's all according to a lawsuit filed in California where a woman allegedly went into surgery. Actually, I'm pretty sure she went into surgery. It's what allegedly happened next. She had a diseased kidney, and she wanted the diseased kidney removed. Turns out you got 2 of those. At least you start out with 2, generally speaking. And she came out missing her spleen in a screw-up that it took 5 specialists to figure out. So she's filed a lawsuit. She's 55 years old now, and she's facing another operation to remove the kidney. Turns out that when they removed the wrong organ, they left the bad kidney in there. And now they got to go back in and remove the kidney. Now, she's also suffered emotional distress, and she's vulnerable to infections due to these operations, according to the lawsuit. And the regional medical center that did the work said, during this difficult time for patient and her family members, we offer our sympathy because this case is pending. We're unable to comment. So the place she had the work done has sympathy for her, but they cannot comment on what happened because it's ongoing litigation. The mistake initially went undetected. Now, this happened back in June of last year. She went in for surgery, had surgery, they removed something, she left. But they sent the bad organ to a pathologist who wasn't sure what to make of it because it didn't look like a bad kidney to him. So he asked other pathologists to confirm his diagnosis because he diagnosed the kidney to be a spleen. Ultimately, 5 pathologists agreed that the organ submitted for examination was a spleen and not a kidney. Now, I'm not making fun of people in the medical profession. I suspect that's just written awkwardly. But I'd have to guess if you put a kidney on the table and a spleen on the table and asked a pathologist, what's that and what's that? They'd probably go, oh, that's a spleen, that's a kidney. Now, of course, a diseased kidney might look like a spleen for all I know. Or maybe out of context, if they just send you a shriveled up old organ and go, what's this? Can you tell us what's wrong with this kidney? You might start looking at it for a second before you go, wait a second, it's not a kidney, it's something else. So the pathologist then called the hospital, according to the patient's attorney. And the hospital immediately runs a CT scan, and sure enough, her kidney was still there. That's the one they're supposed to remove. And instead, they'd removed her spleen. Now, her attorney called the surgical error insane. Now, I've heard of stories, and these stories are legendary, but they make the news because they are fairly uncommon. I'm not saying all surgeons are bad. I'm not saying all cops are bad. Got to throw that in there. But I've heard of stories before where someone goes in to have a leg removed for some reason, and they remove the wrong leg. So then they got to go back in and remove the other leg. And now the person's got no legs when they're supposed to come out with one good leg and missing the bad leg. And I've heard of that happening. I've heard of other things like that as well. I also have known people who've had surgery done, and a surgeon will come in before the surgery and take a magic marker and draw on the leg, this leg, this leg, this leg, and then not this leg, no, on the other leg, just to make sure it doesn't happen. And I don't blame them for doing that. I'll take the inconvenience of some Sharpie marks on my leg that'll save it from being accidentally removed. The lawsuit names a doctor, the medical center, and a group of doctors who are associates. I guess that's probably one of the people, the surgeon maybe works with them. And also another doctor is identified in the lawsuit. So there's a whole bunch of different defendants here. And an attorney for one of them told the Fresno Bee that the incident was fully investigated by the California Department of Public Health and that the surgeon was a visiting surgeon who did this. But then there's apparently some questions about which surgeon did the surgery because the plaintiff's attorney acknowledged it is possible that the surgeon that they named did not perform the surgery, but they're having a hard time confirming it. Now, when a spleen is removed, other organs take over most of its functions, but it brings a higher risk of serious infections down the road, according to the Mayo Clinic. Hold the Mayo. She's at risk for infections, and she has to be very sensitive to that issue, the attorney said. She's had to have a lot of injections to prevent infections in the future, and she still needs that bad kidney to be removed. So here she is a year later with the bad kidney but no spleen. In a 2017 case in Orange County, California, a Santa Ana urologist was barred from further kidney surgeries after removing a patient's spleen instead of a kidney, according to the LAist. So that's an interesting parallel. Same thing happening at another medical facility in California. And so it makes me wonder, and again, I know there are people in the audience from all backgrounds. So I hear from people from time to time, whenever I mention a specific profession I've never mentioned before, someone will come out and say, Steve, I watch your videos all the time. I've just never commented before because you never mentioned my profession before. But now that we are, in fact, talking about, topography on the moon, I think I should tell you something, since you brought it up. And so now, since I brought this up, which is surgery and how organs look, I understand, first of all, and this is something that many people don't understand, is that you've seen movies and illustrations and film strips when you're in school and documentaries where they talk about organs, and they'll often have diagrams or illustrations of organs. But what the organs really look like in real life are often very, very different from what you'd expect. And also, some of them are in different places than you'd expect. And, for instance, the person's stomach, the actual organ, the stomach, is usually higher up than most people think, because they think their stomach is down here, because we often refer to the outside of our body down here as our stomach, when in fact the stomach is higher than most people think. But I also know that many of the organs in your body don't look like the organs you imagine that you've seen illustrations of, because the colors are often different. And also, it depends on how old a person is, and some people have different sized organs. And so I'm sure you've heard that if they do an autopsy of somebody, they often take the organs out and weigh them. And they'll say this person's liver looked like this, it weighed like this, and they'll describe it in the autopsy. And the one kidney looked like this and weighed this, and the other one looked like this and weighed this. And so the organs are not necessarily like they are in the toy, The Visible Man, where you can say, the heart is red, the lungs are blue, the spleen is green. No. Sounds like a Dr. Seuss book. But I understand that. Even so, you would think someone whose job it is to remove organs in surgery would know enough not to make that mistake, unless there's something particularly confusing about spleens and kidneys and their placement and so on. Because I was under the impression a spleen is smaller. Maybe it's not. Maybe that's a misconception on my part as well. So it's interesting. One of the things for the people in the audience who are into true crime is if you ever study Jack the Ripper, and there are all kinds of theories as to who he may have been. But one of the things that I'm sure you'll remember if you've looked at this at all or seen documentaries about him is that he was so named because of the fact that there were some victims of his that he mutilated after death. And in a couple of them, he removed organs. And there were people who thought or assumed or guessed or speculated that he had to have either surgical knowledge or at least like butchering knowledge, because of the fact that he would not just remove somebody's organs, but he would do it in the dark, out in a public place, like in an alleyway, presumably working in a hurry and not get caught. And some of the organs he removed were not the easiest ones to get to. And so I'm not going to get into it graphically here, but it's something you should look at if you're interested in true crime and want to know more about why people are so fascinated with Jack the Ripper. And that's one of the reasons, is that these murders, a couple of them, are so specific in what he did to the victims after they died, where there's no question. As we've had situations before with serial killers, where people are dying and they're going, okay, these are all connected. And people go, well, these two don't seem to be connected. With Jack the Ripper, some of them had to be the same person. It's almost mathematically impossible that they weren't. I realize it's possible two guys could be doing this on purpose to make it look like it was one, but highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. So the whole issue with human organs, what they look like in real life, I understand that's a thing. So I'm not making fun of surgeons in general, but I think that these guys here involved in this story screwed up a little bit. And so we'll see what happens and if it makes the news as to what happens. A lot of medical malpractice lawsuits get settled quietly with confidentiality clauses. We might not hear anything else other than the case was dismissed. So we'll see what happens. But Scott sent it. Thanks a lot. Greg Wilson wrote this for dailywire.com. Doctors took out the wrong organ in botched surgery, and it took 5 specialists to unravel, at least according to the lawsuit. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Let the sun beat down upon my face, and stars fill my dream. I'm a traveler of both time and space to be where I have been.